I still remember that morning, the way the world felt calm before everything came crashing down. The sky outside my window was soft and gray, the kind that makes you want to hide under a blanket and stay home. But I had deadlines to meet, clients waiting, and a long list of tasks to check off. I sat at my desk sipping my lukewarm coffee, scrolling through client messages like every other day. Everything felt ordinary, routine, until my phone buzzed with a notification that shattered it all. It was from the company's group chat. A single line that froze the air around me. Urgent. Zara has been accused of financial misconduct. My name. Right there. Public. Exposed. For everyone to see. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe a mix-up or a joke someone was pulling. I even let out a small, awkward laugh. The kind you make when you're trying to convince yourself nothing's wrong. But within minutes, my phone started ringing nonstop. My manager called, his tone clipped and formal, asking me to come to the conference room, immediately. When I walked in, the atmosphere was suffocating. The blinds were drawn, the fluorescent light flickered slightly, and 3 pairs of eyes stared at me, my manager, HR, and one of the senior partners. On the table were printed documents, screenshots, transaction logs. My name appeared on every page. They said money had gone missing from a client's project fund. That every trace, every login, every file, every timestamp pointed to my system. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. That's not me. I didn't do this. My hands shook as I reached for the papers, flipping through them in disbelief. But their faces stayed blank, unmoved, like they'd already delivered the verdict before I even opened my mouth. The more I tried to explain, the colder the room felt. They didn't want my defense. They wanted a scapegoat. And by the end of that meeting, I became exactly that. I was suspended on the spot. Told to clear my desk. HR escorted me to my workstation like I was a criminal. People peeked over their cubicles, whispering, pretending not to watch but watching anyway. As I packed my things, my planner, a small photo frame, a half-empty mug, my hands felt numb. I'd worked there for years, built trust, earned respect. And now, all it took was one accusation to erase it all. My company ID was deactivated before I even reached the exit. My access card didn't beep anymore. My name, once spoken with praise, was now tainted with suspicion. When I stepped into the hallway, everything felt eerily quiet. My heart pounded as I waited for the elevator, trying not to break down in front of the very people who'd once congratulated me for my hard work. Then, as the elevator doors opened, I saw him, leaning casually against the wall with his hands in his pockets. Adrian. He looked at me, eyes gleaming with something almost smug. For a second, I thought maybe he'd say something comforting, maybe even ask what happened. But then I caught it, a faint smirk pulling at the corner of his lips. It wasn't pity. It wasn't confusion. It was satisfaction. And in that single moment, everything inside me went cold. He was the one person I trusted the most. My colleague, my friend, my partner on that very project. I'd shared late nights with him, brainstormed ideas, defended him in meetings. And now I realized the truth. He wasn't just watching me fall. He had pushed me. That smirk told me everything I needed to know. Adrian had always been charming, the kind of charm that made people drop their guard without realizing it. Looking back now, I can see the signs. The way he'd walk into a room and instantly draw everyone's attention. How his laughter always seemed timed perfectly to make others feel comfortable. How he could read people like open books. He had that easy confidence, the kind that wasn't loud, but dangerous in its subtlety. Too charming, too polished. The kind of man who didn't just win people over. He made them believe they needed him. When he joined the team a year ago, he was the office favorite within days. Everyone liked him. The bosses admired his initiative, coworkers loved his team spirit, and clients trusted him instantly. And me? I saw someone with talent, energy, and drive. I thought we were on the same side. We worked on countless late-night projects together. He'd always joke, "Zara, we make a killer team. You handle the clients, I'll handle the strategy. He said it so often it became our thing, our unspoken partnership. I handled the details, the communication, the client trust. He managed the technical parts, the numbers, the presentations. It felt balanced, until I realized it was all one-sided. What I didn't know then was that every time I shared a password, every time I sent him an access file, every time I left my desk unlocked, he was watching, learning, mapping my habits, my timing, my weaknesses. He wasn't building a partnership. He was collecting tools he'd later use to tear me down. Weeks before the accusation, I remember him casually asking to borrow my laptop. He said he needed to fix a formatting issue on a shared client document. I didn't even hesitate. Sure, I said, handing it over without a second thought. He smiled that effortless smile, grateful, harmless. And within that smile, I now realize, hid the setup that would ruin my life. That was the moment he must have planted something. Files, log traces, maybe even fake transactions. A perfect digital trap that would all point back to me. After I was suspended, everything changed. Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. The office that once buzzed with energy fell silent when I walked by. People whispered in hallways, glanced over their shoulders, avoided eye contact. My phone, which used to buzz with team messages and coffee invites, went silent. And Adrian? He played his role flawlessly. The innocent colleague, the heartbroken friend. He told everyone, I don't know what happened, but I really hope Zara clears her name. She doesn't deserve this. His voice carried concern. His face showed sympathy. But his eyes, those eyes, hid something darker. He was the kind of manipulator who didn't just frame me. He wrote the narrative of my downfall himself. A week after I was suspended, he even had the nerve to show up at my apartment. He brought coffee, stood at my door like some supportive friend, and said he just wanted to check on me. His tone was soft, caring, almost too kind. For a moment, I almost believed it. But when our eyes met, I saw it. That faint spark of satisfaction, buried beneath the mask. That wasn't empathy. That was triumph. In that instant, I knew. The man standing at my door wasn't there to comfort me. He was there to watch the aftermath, to see the person he destroyed crumble in front of him. Adrian wanted me gone. He wanted my job, my clients, my reputation, maybe even the sense of power that came with taking it all. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, was that I wasn't done. He thought he had won. He thought his charm and deceit would keep him untouchable, but he didn't know who he was dealing with. For weeks I spiraled. The days blurred into each other, mornings that started with hope and ended in a heavier silence. No job, no income, no respect. I went through the motions because there was nothing else to do. I answered a few texts, scrolled past old photos, tried to eat, tried to sleep. But everything felt hollow, like I was moving through someone else's life that had been slashed open and left for show. Everywhere I went, people looked at me like I was guilty. Colleagues glanced quickly away when I walked past, their faces folding into puzzled sympathy or thinly veiled relief that it wasn't them. Old friends stopped calling. Their messages grew shorter, colder, and then stopped altogether. My parents sat across from me one night, and their eyes were glassy with worry, the kind that punches through whatever pride you might have left. They didn't accuse me, but the hurt in their faces felt worse than any accusation spoken aloud. Nights were the worst. Daylight offered distractions, phone calls, errands, the small normal tasks that make a life look intact. But the dark stretched long and loud. I would lie awake and replay moments in my head. The conference room, the printed logs, Adrian's smirk. I imagined conversations, rewound sentences, tried to find where I had slipped or what I might have missed. My chest tightened so often I learned to breathe through it. Tears came at odd times. When I opened the fridge, when a client's old message popped up on my screen, when a song I loved played on the radio. Grief wasn't just for loss of job or reputation. It was for the version of myself that still believed in people without suspicion. There were moments, raw and sharp, when rage rose up and burned everything into blackout rage. I wanted to scream at the executives who had decided before hearing me. I wanted to drag Adrian into the middle of the office and strip away his lies until he had nothing left. Those thoughts flashed bright and furious, but they never lasted. Anger is hot and fast. It leaves you tired and hollow if you feed it. I knew I couldn't win by becoming him. I had to be smarter. One night, after another day of silence and small humiliations, I sat in a dark apartment with only my phone screen for company. The city hummed faintly outside, indifferent. I stared at the ceiling and asked myself, why am I letting him win? The question landed hard and didn't leave. It moved under my skin and changed something. Not overnight. Not like a switch, but like a seed settling into soil. If Adrian had played dirty, then I needed to play smart. That didn't mean stooping to his level. It meant being patient, methodical, and calm. It meant using the facts he'd tried to hide against him, not his lies against mine. I understood then that revenge wasn't about rage. It was about justice. It was about setting things right so the truth could stand on its own 2 feet and be seen. I resolved in that stillness to let karma do the heavy lifting, to let time, evidence, and the stubborn weight of truth do what my shouting could not. But karma doesn't move on its own. Sometimes she needs a nudge, a careful push in the right direction. I would not be the person who tore another down to feel better. I would be strategic, find the gaps, gather proof, build a clean trail that led away from me and straight to the person who orchestrated my fall. So I began to plan. Not with fury, but with cold focus. I sketched out what I knew, what I didn't, and where the weak points of his story might appear. I called one friend who still worked at the company and asked a neutral question. Nothing dramatic, just enough to see if the rumor mill had shifted. I started saving every email, every message, every strange timestamp I could find. Small steps, steady and quiet. I would reclaim my life not by breaking him, but by revealing what he had already done. I started by going back to the beginning, to every file, every email, every trace of my work that still existed on my old drives. It felt like stepping into a crime scene where the evidence had been scattered in plain sight. I spent hours hunched over my laptop, eyes burning, scrolling through old project logs, server records, and archived messages. Each click carried the faint hope that maybe, somewhere in that mess, the truth was still hiding. At first, everything looked normal. Folders neatly labeled, files in their usual places. But the deeper I went, the more things started to feel off. There were login timestamps that didn't make sense. Entries showing I'd accessed company files at 2:47 a.m., even though I was asleep in my apartment. There were edits made on weekends when I hadn't even opened my laptop. I compared the activity logs to my phone's GPS records, to my Wi-Fi history, to my own memory of where I'd been. They didn't align. Someone had been using my credentials, someone who knew exactly how I worked and how to make it look like I'd done it. Still, suspicion wasn't proof. I couldn't walk into the company with theories and expect them to listen. I needed something concrete, something that tied all the pieces back to Adrian. That's when I remembered. A small moment that had seemed harmless at the time. Weeks before the accusation, Adrian had asked to use my external drive. We were finalizing a client presentation, and he said his USB was full. I handed mine over without hesitation. I didn't think twice about it then. But now, sitting alone in the glow of my screen, that moment felt different, intentional. I dug through drawers until I found the drive, still tucked inside a zippered pouch. My hands shook as I plugged it in. The system whirred to life and folders blinked onto the screen. Years of saved work, backups, and half-forgotten projects. I started searching manually, opening every directory, every hidden file. Hours passed. My head ached. My eyes felt like sand. But something in me refused to stop. Then I found it. Deep inside a buried folder path, several layers down where no ordinary user would ever look. There it was. A document titled Client Data, Final v3.docs. At first glance, It looked like a normal client report, but the timestamp told another story. It had been created 3 days after my suspension. 3 days after my account had been disabled. My name appeared in the metadata as the document author, just like all the others he'd planted. But there was something different this time, something he hadn't thought to hide. I opened the file properties and traced the upload path. My heart pounded as I read it line by line, until I saw it. User. Adrian.ki stared at the screen, barely breathing. It was small, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't looking for it, but it was enough. The connection was there, etched into the digital trail he'd tried so hard to cover. My name might have been in the author field, but the system itself had recorded the truth. That single line, his username, cracked open his perfect plan. I sat back in my chair, the weight of weeks of helplessness lifting off my chest. I had found it, the thread that could unravel everything he'd built on lies. For the first time since my world fell apart, I felt something close to control again. The truth wasn't gone. It had just been buried, and I had finally started to dig it out. Instead of storming into his life and demanding answers, I did the hardest thing I could. I waited. I decided to watch him, to let him move freely, to see what he would do when he thought I was gone for good. People like Adrian always trip over their own arrogance. They just need enough rope. Through a friend who still worked at the company, I learned what I already suspected. Adrian had taken my position. Not temporarily, permanently. He'd slid right into my role as if it had been meant for him all along. My clients were now his clients. The projects I had built from scratch, the ones that carried my late nights, my ideas, my sweat, he now claimed as his own. And the worst part? He was thriving. Management adored him. They called him a savior, the man who cleaned up after Zara's mess. He played the hero flawlessly, walking through the office with that same confident smile, charming every room he entered. To everyone else, he was the golden employee, reliable, brilliant, trustworthy. But I knew the truth. I had seen the cracks behind the charm, the way his ambition dripped with deceit. I told my friend to keep an eye on him quietly. No one suspected her, and she was good at staying invisible. Weeks later, she started sending me screenshots, internal chats, updated reports, activity logs. The pattern was unmistakable. Adrian was doing it again. He was manipulating data, cutting corners on projects, and adjusting client numbers to make his reports look better. The same scheme he'd used to destroy me was now his own playbook for success. Only this time he didn't have me as his shield. He was running unchecked, confident that no one would ever question him. After all, hadn't he already exposed a fraud before? His reputation protected him, but greed makes people sloppy. It blinds them to details. And Adrian's greed was starting to show. My friend mentioned he was rushing through deadlines, submitting half-finished documents, signing off on things without review. He was juggling too many lies, and sooner or later, one of them would fall. And then, as if the universe itself decided to intervene, fate handed me the perfect opportunity. The company announced an internal audit. Every major department, every key project would be reviewed, including his. When I got the message from my friend that night, I sat still for a moment, reading it twice just to be sure. My pulse steadied. My lips curled into a quiet, deliberate smile, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. This wasn't just chance. This was timing. The kind that only arrives when patience finally meets purpose. Karma was already on her way. Steady, silent, unstoppable. And this time, I wasn't just going to wait for her. I was going to walk her right up to his door. I wasn't about to make the same mistake twice. This time I played the game on my terms. Quiet, calculated, invisible. I gathered everything I'd collected, the logs, the metadata, the screenshots, every digital breadcrumb that pointed to Adrian's handiwork. Then I built the perfect little package. Clean, professional, impossible to ignore. No drama, no accusations, just facts. When I sent it to the internal audit team, I made sure it came from an anonymous source. No trace, no signature, no digital fingerprints that could circle back to me. Just a short, polite message. You might want to look into the user logs for Adrian K., especially the ones uploaded from unauthorized devices. That was it. No threats, no story. Just enough truth to light the fuse, and they did take the bait. A week later, the office started buzzing again. Only this time, my name wasn't the one on everyone's lips. Rumors floated through meetings and chat groups. The golden boy wasn't shining quite as bright anymore. There were questions about missing files, mismatched data, strange login histories. The same red flags that once ruined me were now wrapping themselves around him like a noose. Adrian began to feel the pressure. My friend told me he'd stopped staying late at work, too nervous to be alone. He double-checked his emails, jumped every time someone from management walked by. The walls were closing in and he knew it. Then one evening, my phone lit up. His name. For a second, I almost laughed. After all that he'd done, he still thought he could control the narrative. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, Zara," he said, forcing a casual tone. "Just wondering if you heard about the audit?" Weird timing, right? His voice cracked halfway through. That little tremor was everything I needed to hear. Proof that his mask was slipping. I kept my voice calm, almost bored. "Yeah," I said softly, weird. "Karma works fast sometimes." There was silence on the other end, the kind that tastes like fear. Then he mumbled something about catching up soon and hung up. I set my phone down, leaned back, and exhaled. For the first time, I wasn't the one being hunted. I was the storm he never saw coming. It was almost poetic, watching everything he'd built on deceit collapse under the weight of his own arrogance. The audit team moved fast once they connected the dots. They uncovered unauthorized transfers buried inside project budgets, fake invoices cleverly renamed to look legitimate, and doctored client files that had been edited just enough to fool a casual eye, but not an expert one. Every file, every transaction, every log traced straight back to Adrian's account. The same breadcrumbs he once used to destroy me had now formed a perfect trail right back to him. When the truth hit, the office exploded with whispers. The golden boy, the so-called savior who cleaned up my mess, was exposed for what he truly was: a manipulator, a thief, and a fraud. People who once sang his praises now avoided his gaze. His charm, his easy smile, gone. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight of his lies had finally crushed him. Desperation made him reckless. He tried one last stunt, claimed that I had hacked his account, that I was out for revenge. But the IT team wasn't fooled this time. They had his device logs, IP addresses, and timestamps. Every login was from his own laptop, his own network, his own hands. There was no one left to blame. He was suspended pending investigation within hours. A week later, he was gone, fired, blacklisted, reputation shattered. When the company emailed me the official letter clearing my name, I stared at it for a long time. I thought I'd cry, maybe even celebrate. But instead there was only silence. Stillness. The kind that follows a storm when all the debris finally settles. Peace. Because in the end, the truth didn't just save me, it buried his lies, permanently. And for the first time in a long while, I could breathe again. A month passed, and the storm had finally cleared, at least for me. I had started freelancing again, slowly rebuilding what he tried to destroy. My reputation was healing, clients were coming back, and for the first time in months, my mornings felt light again. Then word spread about Adrian. He'd been blacklisted from most firms in the city. The story of his downfall had traveled fast, faster than the lies he once told about me. No one wanted to hire the man who betrayed his own team for personal gain. The golden boy had fallen, and this time, there was no one left to save him. But I didn't feel satisfaction, not the kind people expect. I didn't post about it, didn't send messages, didn't even whisper "I told you so," Because real revenge doesn't need an audience. Sometimes silence screams louder than any victory speech. Then one quiet evening, life brought him back into view. I was at a small cafe, laptop open, working on a new project when I heard a voice I hadn't expected to hear again. I looked up and there he was, Adrian. He looked hollow. The crisp suits were gone, replaced by a wrinkled shirt and tired eyes. His smile, once sharp and confident, barely held itself together. He walked over slowly, like someone carrying too much shame to stand tall. "Zara," he said, voice low. "I guess you won." I closed my laptop gently and met his eyes. "No, Adrian," I said softly. "Karma did." He dropped his gaze, shoulders sinking. For the first time, I saw something real in him. Not arrogance, not charm, but regret. The kind that eats a person from the inside. As he walked away, I didn't feel hate anymore. Just closure. Because sometimes you don't need to destroy someone to see justice served. You just have to let karma speak, and she always does, eventually. After everything that happened, I thought moving on would be impossible. But life has a strange way of mending itself once the truth is out. Piece by piece, the chaos faded, and I began to rebuild. Not the life I had before, but something stronger. The company reached out a few weeks later. They wanted me back, same position, same desk. A public gesture to make things right. For a moment I considered it. But then I remembered the whispers, the cold stares, the way no one stood by me when I needed them most. That chapter was over, so I said no. Instead, I took everything I had learned, the pain, the betrayal, the lessons, and built something of my own. A small consulting firm that valued honesty, accountability, and transparency. I wanted to create the kind of environment I once believed in. It wasn't easy. Starting from scratch never is. But the difference was, this time, every client, every project, every success was mine. No manipulation, no shadows, just hard work and truth. Slowly, people began to notice. Old clients returned, apologizing for doubting me. New ones came through referrals. My name, once dragged through mud, started to mean something again. And as I watched my business grow, I realized the real meaning of revenge. It wasn't in watching Adrian fall. It wasn't in the silence or the karma that found him. It was in standing tall again. Not as the woman he tried to destroy, but as the woman who refused to stay broken. Because true revenge isn't about ending someone else's story. It's about reclaiming your own and writing it better than before. Looking back now, I can finally say it. I'm grateful Adrian betrayed me. It sounds strange, even to me, but his betrayal forced me to face parts of myself I didn't know existed. The pain, the humiliation, the loss, they all carved out a new kind of strength inside me. One that didn't rely on approval, reputation, or anyone else's validation. At first, I wanted to fight back the same way he did, with anger, with vengeance. But that kind of revenge only burns you from the inside. So I chose patience instead. I chose truth. I chose to trust that karma doesn't miss her mark, and she didn't. I didn't need to destroy him. I didn't have to twist the knife or prove my worth to those who doubted me. All I had to do was stand still and let time reveal everything. He thought he had taken everything from me. My job, my reputation, my peace. But in trying to destroy me, he handed me something far more powerful: clarity. I saw what real integrity looks like when it's tested. I learned that silence can roar louder than revenge. Adrian's fall wasn't my victory. It was his consequence. Because when you stop chasing revenge and start trusting karma, life finds a way to even the scales on its own. He thought he destroyed me. But in the end, he only destroyed himself, and that's the quietest, most powerful revenge there is.